So, it's Christmas, right? And we've been in the middle of an Advent series, and we're going to continue on with that today. We're going to do our Advent celebration at our closing today, because we'll celebrate that last thing before we leave this morning. And last week we talked about God's plans and how they're not our plans. And we talked about how sometimes when God wants us to do something and it's going to be hard, that we need to not be afraid. And we need to not be afraid and trust Him so we'll be able to get the job done. And we've talked and looked at the Christmas story in Luke, and we've looked at it in Matthew. And last week it was kind of funny because I said I didn't like Matthew's version as much because I found it a little bit boring, but I have to stand here convicted today saying that I spent all this past week in Matthew, and it's revealed just as much exciting things about God to me as Luke does. Luke is more concentrated on the relationships and the people and the story in how they interact. But Matthew, he starts off with the genealogy of Jesus and really kind of giving the facts that this is the Messiah and this is what happened, more of a factual account of that. And what is great about that is it shows how God's plan came to fruition, how He completed His plan. And it's exciting, exciting stuff. So we're going to pick up in Matthew where we left off last week. And we're going to go to Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2. And I am going to, you can look up Matthew because we're going to be reading from there most of the message. And Matthew is the first book of the New Testament. So that should be a good one for you to find. And chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." So I'm going to stop right there as we go into this morning. And there's going to be a lot of gift giving probably over the next couple days with our families. And it's interesting, have you ever received a gift and it was kind of a bad gift, or you didn't like it, or you had a bad reaction to the gift, or maybe you had the most amazing gift in the world you received one Christmas? Or too many of the same thing, or like, oh, yay, the 5th sweater I got. Re-gifting. So we have this, since we give so many gifts this time of year, we have this common thing, but we all give our gift wanting the person to feel loved and appreciated. And so we're going to look this morning at a couple of pictures of reactions to Christmas gifts. And some of them hopefully will be amusing to you. So we're going to look at a few of these. Now, this is the ultimate Christmas gift example, the Christmas story with the Red Ryder BB gun. And if you remember when he got that pink bunny suit, and he wasn't really overjoyed because his aunt thought he was a girl. And so his reaction wasn't a real happy reaction to that gift. But then when he opened his BB gun and he got the gift he wanted, he was just full of joy and happiness. So that's one of the examples I know at our house when Christmas Eve starts, Christmas Story starts playing 24 hours a day in our house, and we just leave that on for 24 hours and have that ongoing the whole time. So let's look at some other pictures that I found for us. Look at this little girl. She's happy. Let's see the next one. Oh, not so much. Let's see the next one. Oh, he's excited. It's good. Oh, she's kind of sad. Oh, a sweater. We're happy. We're not so excited. Look at Dad being happy. He got a gift. Dads are usually happy no matter what you get them. All right. Oh, girlfriend's not so much happy no matter what you get them. Yeah, there's that. Oh, not so sure if we like it. Maybe she's scared of what she's getting. I love this one. I love this one. This little girl looks like awe and wonder of what she's getting. Let's see another one. Oh, so anyway, I have a short video clip that if it works, I want to show you more about gift reactions. See if it will play. This is the first time I'm trying to use some media in here, so we'll see.
Seriously, Santa Claus, I'm a little girl!
What is it?
Oh no, this is hopeless. Oh, it's not a bite. Oh man! Don't tell me it's an origami book!
It is.
I can't do origami! It is! Don't you want
To gifts, and I know when my kids were little, sometimes you have to coach them how to have a reaction to a gift so they have an appropriate reaction, or you have to, because they tell everything on their face, you have to kind of say, well now, make sure you don't make your frowny face and say thank you, and they'll always go, but that's not what no, just say thank you. So you have to kind of teach your children how to receive and how to accept a gift. One Christmas, there was one time I wanted a gift really, really bad, and I wanted a puppy. And I was probably about 10, and I wanted a puppy, and I had wanted a puppy forever, and wanted a puppy for Christmas. And Christmas Eve, I could hear, like, out of my parents' room, I could hear some strange, like, noises, like, something making a noise and movement and stuff like that in the bedroom and hidden. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get my puppy. I was so, like, I couldn't sleep the whole night because I heard these noises, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to get that puppy, the puppy I always wanted. And Christmas morning comes, and I had to wait for Mom. Mom wouldn't come down until she was fully dressed with all her makeup on, so you had to wait in your room before you could come see what your presents were. And this whole time I could hear, I'm like, there's something out there. I hear some noises. So excited. And I finally get to go out there and see, and I look, it's not a puppy, it was a bird. And I'm like, a bird. It was a parakeet. So it was making noise and it was alive. But my parents thought, were not ready for that puppy commitment, so they were going to start me off on something. But you know what? I loved that bird. I took care of that bird. He was blue. His name was Smurf. And I had him for 12 years he lived. I took really good care of him. And he could talk. He could fully talk. He could make the same noises that our dog, I finally did get a dog about 3 years later. He could make the dog noises, and he could say the swear words my brother and sister saw. But it wasn't the gift I wanted or the gift I expected, but I really wholeheartedly embraced that situation and was just as happy. Maybe not quite, and I did eventually get that puppy. But that was one time I can remember I was so expecting something and got something else. And that's kind of what the gift of Jesus was like for us and for a lot of people. The people had expectations of what Jesus' arrival would be like. And everyone had a different response to his arrival and to the gift and to the love of Jesus. And so we're going to take a look at this scripture in this story, and we're going to look at 3 responses to the gift of Jesus. First, we're going to look, and let's see. I think I even did. Look at me. I'm doing really good. All right. That was earlier. Give me my next slide. Yes. We're going to look at the response of the Jewish people. We're going to look at the response of King Herod. And then lastly, we're going to look at the response of the wise men. So we're going to look at those 3 examples of people who received the gift of Christ and their reaction to that gift. So first off, we're going to start with the people, the Jewish people. Now, they had been waiting 400 years to hear from God. From the end of the Old Testament, Malachi the prophet, to the New Testament, when you start hearing the first time God interacts is when he tells Sarah and Zechariah about John the Baptist. There's 400 years where there was no prophecy, no speaking. And so the people were waiting and waiting these 400 plus years for their Messiah, for the things that God had prophesied. Well, that's a long time to wait. I know for me, waiting a couple weeks for something can seem hard. We're waiting here to see where our church family is going to go next and what we're going to do, and all the waiting is hard. And while you wait, it's important for you to stay focused on God. But sometimes we just kind of, in our waiting, drift off course in our thoughts, and we lose hope. But the Jewish people knew that Jesus was coming. About that time, this time of the 400 years, when you last hear of Malachi having some prophetic words for the people, Israel is partially in exile. Some of the Israelites are back in Jerusalem, and there's this period of different rulerships they fall under, and when it comes to when Jesus is born, they've had a large population growth in the Israelite community. Some are still in exile, some are still in Jerusalem, and they are under the rule of Rome. And we get that in the beginning because where are Mary and Joseph going? They're going to Bethlehem for the census, because Caesar, all these people, there was population growth, and he wanted to get, Rome needed their taxes, and so that was why they were going there. So that's the situation that the Jewish people were in. They were under this government that took money from them, and so that's where they found themselves. But they knew the prophecy. If you go to Isaiah 7:14, I will go there for us. They knew. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel. Isaiah, hundreds of years before, told them in his prophecy that the king was coming, that Emmanuel was coming. Jeremiah 23 was another one I pulled out, and there tons of prophecies, so they knew something about what was coming. Jeremiah 23, 5 and 6. The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, a king who will reign wisely and do what is just and right in the land. In his days, Judah will be saved and Israel will live in safety. So they had all these prophecies, and they've been under different governments, and they've been under different rulers, and now they're under this Roman ruler. So what are they expecting? They're expecting a powerful leader, a powerful king to come in and conquer everything so that the Jewish people will be on top and everything will be restored to the beautiful days like when King David was in charge. And that's what they're looking for. So they're looking for a political and a warrior and someone that's going to bring armies and going to conquer and make them, set them up to be the chosen people. That's what they're waiting for. That's what they're expecting. God didn't say that, but in their mind, that's what they were expecting when they heard the words, because that's what they wanted. That's how they would do the plan. God's plans are never our plans, but they tried to make their own plan, and it didn't work. And when they received the Messiah, what was their response? Their response was unbelief. Unbelief was their response to the King, to the gift of Jesus. So the people's response was unbelief. Then we have King Herod. And we're going to look at King Herod. All right, so what we need to know about the situation that's going on here so we can understand why people reacted the way that they did to the birth of Jesus. King Herod was appointed the king by Caesar. He wasn't really Jewish, a full Jew, but he was made king of the Jews, just appointed by Caesar, kind of to be like Caesar's yes man and do what he said to do. And Herod, he was the most savvy, ruthless politician king that there was, and he was playing both kind of sides of the government. He was trying to please Caesar. He named things after Caesar. He did these glorious building projects and named buildings after Caesar, and he also rebuilt part of the temple and did glorious things there to kind of show the Jewish people, look what he's playing both sides. He's trying to get he knows he's not the rightful king. And he's trying to hold on to that and trying to make his place there. And what happens then, and we're going to go to Matthew again. Matthew 2, 13 through 18. So, while all this is happening, King Herod was so ruthless and crazy. So I said he wasn't fully Jewish. So he married a Jewish princess so that his kids would be Jewish. So he thought he'd be more accepted that way. And so he had sons, and eventually the sons went to live with Caesar to get trained and educated. And then Herod, in his crazy paranoia, was so threatened by his own sons then, he had his sons killed because they were a threat to his throne. He had that wife killed because in his paranoia, he thought, oh, that was a good idea at the time because it made me look more Jewish and more like the rightful king. But then he got paranoid and was like, well, no, my sons might be king and take my throne. So he had this personality, and he was a real character. So when he heard of the news of Jesus, this is what he did. Matthew 2:13 through 18. When they had gone, this is after the wise men left. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said, "and take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left Egypt, where he stayed until death of Herod. And so was fulfilled the prophecy the Lord had said, "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious and then gave orders to kill all boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. "A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more." Herod believed that this baby Jesus could be the king of the Jews. Belief wasn't his problem. He did not want that. So his response to the Messiah was to try to stop God's plan. Stop it, thwart it, anything possible, because it was a threat to his throne. So that was his response in hearing about Jesus. So today we're left with the Magi, the wise men. We're going to look at their response a little bit more in depth than the others. So who were these wise men? There's a song that says, "We three kings." The wise men weren't kings. We don't really know where that king thing came. It came from the song, probably. But they weren't kings. They were wise men. They were magi. Those are words used to describe them. They were more or less astrologers and just people who knew stuff. There was not formal science at that time. So it would be people that were studied and knowledge and knew things. And where we can learn more about what the wise men are like, I heard, and I think it was my daughter who said, the best commentary to read on the Bible is the Bible. So I want to know about the wise men. I'm going to go see what the Bible says about wise men in different places. And where the Bible talks about wise men is in the book of Daniel in the Old Testament. So I'm going to go there and give us just a quick look at what these wise men would have been like. So if you remember if you remember the story of Daniel, my kids will remember it because of VeggieTales and Rack Shack and Benny and Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah, Nathaniel knows it too. The bunny, the chocolate bunny. Yeah, that's so some of you are thinking, what in the world is she saying? But my teenager generation, that's what they grew up learning their Bible stories with the VeggieTales. And so those songs are still in my head and I can see them. But King Nebuchadnezzar was kind of a crazy king. And he was having these dreams, and he wanted things interpreted. And he wanted to know what things were meaning in his land and for his rule. And so Daniel chapter 2, it says, "In the 2nd year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was so troubled, and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed." So this group of people, astrologers, sorcerers, these were the people that the king would go to for knowledge, to find out things that were happening, to find out prophetic things that they didn't understand. But King Nebuchadnezzar called all of them together, and none of them could give him an answer to his dream. And he got no one could give him an answer to his dream. So he decides he wants all the wise men to be killed because none of them are good enough. But there's this one Daniel, and Daniel was a true prophet of the Lord, and Daniel comes in and interprets the king's dreams. And he does a good job and interprets them. And then Daniel is made charge over all the wise men of the land. And we see that in Daniel 2:48 goes back and he says, "Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all his wise men." So we look at Daniel and we get a picture, a more clear picture of what these wise men were like. And I've read somewhere where there is a theory that these wise men were actually descended from those wise men that were in Daniel's time. We don't know that for sure, but it's a cool correlation to think about. But wise men were the people that the kings went to for understanding things that were happening and giving clear pictures to what was happening. So the Magi, the wise men, they'll know the prophecy. They know all the prophetic stuff. And when it comes to Matthew, it goes back. And the thing that was like, why did it happen this way? And here's this question I had. Because in chapter 2 of Matthew, right away it says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod. The prophecy said that Jesus was going to be born in Bethlehem. But when the wise men came to find Jesus, they went to Jerusalem. The wise men would have known these prophecies. They would have known that Jesus was supposed to be born in Bethlehem. They saw the star and they followed the star. From where they were to Jerusalem, it's estimated it could have took them 2 years to travel that far because they're just traveling by lands, no air. So 2 years after the manger, it takes them to travel. And they don't go to Bethlehem to find little baby Jesus. They go to Jerusalem, to the palace, to find this king, this infant child king, that's the Messiah, the Savior. They go to where King Herod is and the head of the Jewish government because that's where they expect to find him. They expected that he was going to be this person set up in glory that for 400 years the Jewish people were waiting for. And these wise men were like, yes, that's where he's going to be because the people will know this. Shepherds that made the royal birth announcement, I'm sure that people in Jerusalem heard something about that. I'm sure there were people that were like, what, did you hear this thing or whatever? And Herod, the way that he was, I know he would have had his ear to the ground and been listening for chatter, you call it, and he heard about this, so he knew maybe something was coming. And then these wise men show up. And they expect that Herod's a good guy because he's king of the Jews, and he's going to help put the new king in power and conquer for Jerusalem. But that's not what happened. They were expecting something. They were expecting that the people would have been overjoyed and had that same reaction and feeling to them. But one thing they were expecting is they were expecting an earthly king, just like the people wanted, but they were expecting a different kind of earthly king that would do good things. And this is what their response when they are sent out and they find baby Jesus, well, he's not so babyish anymore, in Bethlehem. This is what the response of the wise men was. I'm going to go back to Matthew 2:9. They went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed on coming to the house. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. So the wise men had a really good response to the birth and what they found. Their expectations were different, but this is why I think they really are wise men, because they had the wise response and the correct response. And when we look at that, that's where we can model our response. When the wise men came and they found baby Jesus and it wasn't really their expectations, it says they entered into the house. They bowed down. They recognized the authority of the king. They gave their gifts to the king. They worshiped him, it says. And then they obeyed. God told them not to go back the same way, and they followed the directions and they obeyed. This was the wisest thing about the wise men. What has been your personal response to the gift of Jesus? Or have you made a response? Have you responded to God and God's love and his gift? Have you entered into God's presence? Have we been able to bow down and recognize his authority in your life? If you haven't done those things, you can. And the Christmas season, and taking the example of the wise men, you can do that, and you can do it today. They entered in. They bowed, recognized the authority. They gave their gifts and what they had. They worshiped him as the all-powerful God of love in the universe. And then they obeyed. That obey part is the part some of us sometimes don't do. We're like, yes, we love Jesus. We know he's there. We worship him, all of this stuff. But there's a last component there to the response, and that's obey. Because we're all part of this Christmas story. Every single one of us sitting here today. And if we don't do our part of the plan falls short. So we're going to talk a little bit more about our part of the plan as we talk a little bit more about Advent today. So we didn't light our Advent candles at the beginning of service because I wanted to save that as a special thing that we would do together at the end as we reflect on our response to God, our response to the Jesus and the gift of love in our lives. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the worship, our little worship team that I'm so thankful did an amazing job this morning. I'm going to have them come up here and get ready. I am going to pass this basket of candles and take one, and everybody can get one of those candles. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what all of this is, because we've done this Advent celebration and this wreath and stuff up here, and sometimes we don't know what it's about. You guys can, it's going to take me about a couple minutes to talk, so just relax. So this is our Advent wreath. And Advent in the Wesleyan Church, we can celebrate it. It's a great tradition. But none of this is a requirement. It's not a requirement to our faith. A lot of churches do not do Advent. This is the first Advent series that I've actually done. Usually I forego that and do something more topic-driven so that people don't hear the same story and it becomes a little bit like white noise. But it can be powerful if we think about what it means. So this Advent wreath that's a circle, it represents God. God is a circle, never ending. His mercy never ends. It's green, and it should be real, but ours is green. But the greenness of the Advent wreath, it represents newness, hope, life. I need one of those. Yeah, they're fine. Nope. So, the roundness of it, the greenness of it. And then there's the candles. There's 4 candles. So like we talked about earlier today, that the Israelites were waiting. There was 400 years between when the last prophets made prophecies to when Jesus was born. These 4 candles represent those 400 years. 4 centuries, that's why there's 4. And the whole idea about Advent is for us to remember these 400 years that they waited and their response to the King, because we're in that same transition right now. We're waiting. We're in the place where we're waiting for Jesus to come back. So that's why we look at this waiting period and see how it was done, so that we do our waiting period really well. And that's what the Advent celebration is supposed to teach us and help us to remember. Each of these candles represent hope, joy, love, peace. The 4 candles around. And those are all the elements that take place while we're waiting for Jesus, while we're waiting for him to come back. And then the center candle, they call it the Christ candle. And traditionally, it means that Jesus is here when you light it. A lot of times it's lit I was going to say Good Friday, Christmas Eve service, or on Christmas Day if you have service on those days. But we're going to light it and celebrate Jesus coming in a little bit. So Advent means something, and it's supposed to help us remember. And as we celebrate it in the next couple minutes, you're eventually going to light your candle. I want you to be thinking about what your response is to the gift of Jesus. Have you made a response that's like the response of the wise men? Or are you stuck over here in unbelief? Or are you rejecting that gift? What is your reaction to that gift? Matthew 5:14. I'm going to share that with us. Because not only do the candles and all of these things represent things for us to remember, the actual light of the candles represents the light of Jesus entering the world and that light going out into the world. Matthew 5:14 and 16. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people put a lamp, and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand and gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. You see, when you light this Christ candle, it doesn't stop here. The light from this is supposed to go out into you. And you're supposed to take the light of this out into the world and show people what and who Jesus is. That's our response. And this picture kept coming to my mind all week. And it's a picture of Mary. And Mary going, and she's carrying, we hear the story, the donkey going the long way for the census, going all the way to Bethlehem. Mary carried Jesus inside her. She carried him into our world. But just like Mary did that, we carry Jesus inside us. Literally, we carry Jesus inside of us, and we take him out into the world. Just like she got him here. So we all have a role to play in the Christmas story. And we can't be afraid. And even though that plan is not what our plan would be, how are we going to respond to that plan? How are we going to go out into the world? So here's what we're going to do. You all got your candles already. And I am going to light I'm going to light the first candle. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to light this one to be able to do it. Yep, I got it. I just have to, I know how to do it. I thought I knew how to do it. Unless it's out. Could be out. Got it. Gee, that broke my spiritual rhythm. So we're going to get it back. So the 400 years, for 400 years, the people waited. They waited, and in those 400 years, they found peace. They found joy. They found love. And they found faith. And they found these things when they leaned into God. When their response was to hold on to God, put their eyes on Him, and to focus on Him and His promise and His hope. And then God fulfilled His promises like He always does, just like He's going to fulfill His promise to us, and Jesus is going to come back here to us. And Jesus came into the world. And so what we're going to do now to symbolize our response is we're going to all light our candles, and we'll just kind of spread it around. And while you're doing that, I'm going to read a scripture. So I'm just going to light Alex's candle over here. And then he'll just can help light everybody's off of that candle. And the reading I'm going to give to us is a reading from Isaiah, what God has promised and what we are to expect. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past, He humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but the future He will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea and beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light was dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy, and rejoiced before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke of burdens for them, a bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled to blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel to the fire. For to us a child is born. To us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice, righteousness from the time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. God kept His promises. He brought Jesus. He went to the cross. What is our response? What is our response to Him? Have you entered His presence? Have you bowed and acknowledged His authority that He's the King? Have you given Him your gifts, your life, your worship? And are you doing your part of the story? Are you going out and carrying the light? Just like Mary carried Jesus in her womb, we carry Jesus out in our heart to the people and to the world. So we're going to stand and we're going to sing, "Oh, Come All Ye Faithful," and we're just going to reflect on our acceptance, our response to the gift of Jesus this morning.